ad was produced by the Ad Council of America. It's a very powerful group, obviously regulating the kind of ads that are out there, providing leadership and what we're allowed to show on TV and other places. And the message resonates with so many, doesn't it? The cultural message of what love is at the heart of what I think we're facing on this issue. You know, the bad news about being the last person to speak is everyone's tired, ready to go to bed, right? At least I am. The good news, of course, is we get hopefully the last word, the last thing for you to think about. And so I'm glad that we're able to talk about the nature of what love is as our foundation as we go. Because I highly suspect that many of the questions we're even getting today are questions from people who are not on our side, who take the revisionist, not the redemptive view, because they're actually very similar to the questions, almost to the word, I think, that I got when I spoke online a year ago, right? And so there's this foundational idea that what they hold as a view is loving, is good. They're the good guys. They know what love is. I think fuels their opposition and their zealousness to counter what we believe. In fact, they're evangelists to change entirely what we believe as Christians. And that's why the revisionist label is so accurate. The challenge is if you can revise any part of the Bible to conform to what you believe, you can revise all parts of the Bible. We actually see that. Mark Campolo, the famous son of Baptist pastor Tony Campolo, who became a revisionist himself on the issue of sexuality, became an atheist, became one of the first atheist chaplains in Ohio. And from his estimation, he says 40% of liberal Christian revisionists end up becoming atheists anyway because they basically believe the same thing. They can determine what the Bible teaches, not God himself. And if you think about it, that's the exact same lie Satan told Adam and Eve. You can know good and evil without God. Right? It's not a very creative force that we're dealing with, but very powerful lie because he has a lot of practice. And when we look at this video, there's two fundamental things that I see already on the nature of love. Right? The first is throughout the whole video, it actually never defines love. Do you notice that? I attended, again, the largest gay Christian conference in Chicago in 2019 because it was about love. It was the title of the theme for the conference was called Love Undivided. And they had some of the biggest names, you have probably heard of them if you know this topic very well, of those revisionist Christians, people who worked at Exodus International who are now on the other side. And I listened very carefully as these main speakers and breakout speakers that I attended talked about the nature of love, and not one time did anyone actually define what love is. So at the last talk I attended, I was really frustrated and trying not to be mean, but the talk was actually about love itself. And it was about how you can create these talk groups with conservative evangelicals and get them to revise their theology through these dialogue groups that were titled something like love dialogue groups. But again, no definition of love. So being a good journalism student as I was, I raised my hand and asked a question. I'm sorry I missed it, I said. I might have been late when we started, but can you please tell me, what do you mean by love? And it was the longest 10 seconds, I think, for some of them. It was like I dropped my pants when I asked this question because it sort of stunned. Right? And so one of them said, well, love is like puppies and kittens. One person said, I can't define love, but it's like when you put your arms around each other and you walk down a field, that's love. I thought, really? That's the best you can do after your whole conference is about love? Right? And so this is the point. Somehow, we've assumed we know what love is. We can create videos like this and be self-righteous. I'll use that word because I think it's true, that we're loving and you're not because you don't accept LGBT people. Do you see just the deception that they've bought into? And they haven't even given themselves an actual definition of what love is. The challenge, of course, is when we ask the question, what is love, our culture does something like this, especially on this issue. This was the front page cover of the Calgary Herald a few years ago. This little boy is wearing a t-shirt that says, when I grow up, I'm free to be what I want to be. Very loving message. So we need to love this kid and let him do whatever he wants to do. Except, if you think about it, is that really loving? If he wants to be prime minister or an astronaut or a truck driver, great, right? We need those truck drivers, right? However, if he wants to be a racist or a rapist, would we celebrate him being whatever he wants to be? Right? No, of course not. That's not love. Yet that's the challenge we have. Because the other challenge this video gives us, who doesn't answer, is it assumes this slogan: love is love. And this is the image. You think about it, right? Two men, two women, a man and woman, a man and two women, right? That's love. People can love in whatever way they want. And what's so broken about this is we know, as I mentioned this morning, intuitively, that this doesn't work, right? When we talk about love, we're using words that have multiple meanings. This became a reality for me, as I shared, when I went to see a Christian counselor for my own same-sex attractions. And one of the things we explored, and I thought about immensely as I struggled through this, is this person, this guy that was part of my Bible study group. What was I attracted to him about? Why did I think that I loved him? He was my first crush. Is that attraction normal? Is that right? See, these are the questions. If you've never faced this issue, if your child is talking to you about this issue, that's what they're dealing with. The first person you dialogue about with same-sex attraction is yourself. Not even God, not even your family. You dialogue that with yourself. And what was critical for me was to realize if I truly cared for this guy, if I truly loved him, then I need to understand what love looks like. Because I don't think it's sexual love that's best for him. I think it's something else. If you think about the word love, think how often we use the phrase, I love you, or I love that, or I love this. Right? If you say, I love you, is that the same kind of love if you were, say, talking about pizza? Or the very rare people who are special people who love math? That's my mom. She helps me do my taxes still. Or is that the same word that you use when you describe your love for grandma? Right? Hopefully not, right? The grandmas out there. Or about when you get married. Is that the same kind of word that you use? Well, of course not, right? We know this. And this is part of our response to the love is love challenge our culture is giving us. Love is so much deeper than a slogan. There's so much more we can unpackage, especially if we understand the biblical view of love. Because at this gay Christian conference that had a title of love in it, not one time did they ever cite the biblical understanding of what love is. And it's right here in 1 John. Right, there's no 1 John, that when we talk about love, beloved, let us love one another, for love is of God, and everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God. He who doesn't love doesn't know God, for God is love. Isn't that a definition right there of what love is? Pastor George mentioned it, and it's such a great tool to use. When I talk to my Muslim friends, I was at a debate with a Muslim and an atheist, and the question of the debate was, does God exist, yes or no, or true or false? I thought, well, but it doesn't work in terms of the question, and why is there me, an atheist, and a Muslim in this debate, right? It was weird. But I pointed out, because I wanted to make sure I engaged both the atheist and the Christian in the debate, that I said, the Muslim understanding of love, as Pastor George mentioned, is one where God himself needs something to create in order to experience love. So is that a good source for what true love is? A God who's incomplete in himself, who needs to create something to have a relationship? Or does the Christian view of God, that God is relationship, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, that is the source of love, that God himself craves relationship because he's already in relationship and wants to extend that love to us? And the Muslims in the audience had no response to that. They tried to deny it, but they understood that the only way, the best source for understanding love is to know God. Because if you know God, then you know love. And when we look at what love is that God talks about, we realize the scripture has at least 4 ways God expresses his love for us. And as I mentioned, I really appreciate C.S. Lewis' book, The 4 Loves, because he lists this out. And I'm sure if you have had good pastors, which most of you have if you're in this room, you've talked about these 4 loves. What I want to point out, though, is each of these 4 loves meets a unique, distinct need that God designed us to have. And then here's the other part. God actually, with the highest form of each of these loves, God expresses towards us. And when we live in a culture that's confused about love, articulating, being able to narrate to our young people and to ourselves that there's 4 loves that we have is such a critical response to the confusion they have about love, because it shows just how shallow their understanding truly is. The very people who are self-righteous about being more loving than us actually don't know what true love is all about. When we think about that, the first one is storge love. Storge is also known as family love. It's the love, C.S. Lewis says, that you get when you look at your firstborn child or your grandchild, and you know this little baby has you all around their finger for the rest of your life, right? That's how you feel. That's how God feels about us. And when we look at Scripture's view of love in this way, Jesus again says, for you have not received, or Paul says, you have not received a spirit of slavery leading to fear again, but you have received a spirit of adoption as sons by which we cry out, Abba, Father. This is such a powerful word, Abba, if you know it, right? It speaks to daddy, an intimacy, a closeness, the kind of thing the Roman culture at the time would not have heard of, or at least think about when it comes to intimacy with God. And yet here is Jesus offering, the Christian worldview offering this kind of intimacy. We're no longer strangers. We are now family. One of the most powerful things about the early church, if you remember, is that it was in Antioch. The word Christian was first used, right? That most of us know that in the book of Acts. But just like many Roman towns, the city of Antioch was actually ghettoized. The Jews, the Romans, everyone else was living separately. And one of the reasons why they lived separately was because that was the definition, that's what the label they gave to each other. Except when people started becoming followers of Jesus. Because now they formed a different community and they came from all of these tribes, and in their mindset they needed a new label too. And the label they gave them was Christian. So from the very beginning, the word Christian was always meant as a word to unite people of diverse backgrounds to be one family. Isn't that a powerful community that we offer to lonely kids and young people who think they need to have their sexuality define them? When we think about the next love, philia, or friendship love, it's one Lewis says, actually, that we don't actually need to actually survive. He said all the other 3 loves, we can't even exist without them. Philia love is sort of optional, but he says it's the love that makes life worth thriving. We thrive because we have this love. It makes life worth living because we have this love. And we think about the friendship love, it's the kind of love David and Jonathan had in 1 Samuel, Ruth and Naomi. And it's interesting, isn't it, that the LGBTQ culture often wants to sexualize all of these loves because that's the only way they understand intimacy. There's actually a Queen James Bible. I don't know if you know that. You can buy it on Amazon. Where all the characters in the Bible are gay, except for one. Guess which one? Judas. Someone said it over here. Good guess. Absolutely. Because they think this is the way we ought to express intimacy. So for us, when we talk about this, and this is how I want to encourage our speakers at Faith Beyond Belief, we want to encourage young people to recognize that there is a legitimate need for same-sex intimacy. And you notice the words I use very carefully. I distinguish between same-sex sexual intimacy and same-sex intimacy. Because same-sex intimacy is something we all need. We know that if you go to a middle school dance, where are all the boys? One side of the wall. Where are all the girls? The other side of the wall. And you know what? That's okay. Right? At that age, we need to be able to bond with people of the same sex. In fact, that's why God gave us a mom and a dad. And our gender identity, our sexuality, is defined not by ourselves alone, but by the community that's around us when people of the same sex affirm us and people of the opposite sex affirm us. That's why God gave us community, and that's why the LGBTQ understanding that we define ourselves by how we feel internally is so false, because God didn't make us to be internally defined. We are part of His community. In fact, this is something so common. I mentioned that earlier, but one of my favorite heroes in history is Abraham Lincoln. When he was a law student, he actually lived in the same bed, slept in the same bed with his friend Joshua Speed. He even wrote intimate letters to him. When he and his future wife, Mary, had a fight, he actually moved in with Joshua for the summer, hiding from his future wife. Any bachelors do that? right? But that was perfectly normal. And there was no hint until recently that this was a sexual relationship. They were intimate, close, same-sex friends. Praise God for that. Right? They needed each other. Joshua, by the way, married a woman, lived happily ever after as well. In fact, I found this website called the Art of Manliness. It's a pretty funny website if you want to learn about how being a manly man in our culture. And they discovered these photos from the early 1900s, late 1800s. I showed you the basketball ones, but there were others where they found these men posing with their best friends in ways that most of us would look from our cultural lens and say, wait a second, that looks awfully, the word, right? But these photos were expensive photos to take, and they would pose this way with their best friend. Again, there was no hint at all that this was sexual. It was just normal. It was part of their life and be able to express the same-sex friendship that they had. Now, here's the question I would give you as church people, with your young people. Do you encourage a healthy same-sex intimacy with your boys and your girls in your school or your church? Do you encourage them? Do you affirm their right to need that? Because that's love. That's beautiful love, in fact. We need that. Dads with their sons, moms with their daughters, that your children need you to affirm that and to know that's a good thing. And by the way, friendship love is very different from eros love or romantic love. C.S. Lewis actually describes it. I love the spatial part of it. He says, imagine two people who recognize that they're the same and they walk side by side in life. That's a beautiful definition of friendship. Because you see the sameness, you're going in the same direction, you realize you need someone like that in your life. And it's true if you're honest. The best thing, of course, about that is the Bible also describes us as friends. Here's Jesus' quote, where he says, there is no greater love than to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command. I no longer call you slaves, because a master doesn't confide in his slaves. Now you are my friends, since I have told you everything the Father told me. You didn't choose me, I chose you. I appointed you to go and produce lasting fruit so that my Father will give you whatever you ask using my name. This is my command, love each other. Isn't that friendship love right there as well? In fact, Jesus himself had 3, Peter, James, and John, close, intimate male friends that he confided in, that he loved dearly. And there is, unlike the Queen James Bible, there is no evidence at all that that was sexual. And we need to give this narrative to our young people who are being told that this is all about sex. Because that's what they're being told intimacy is about. When intimacy is so much more than that. Well, let's talk about eros love. C.S. Lewis calls it the passion love. The love that makes you want to go out and move mountains, right? He describes this way, right? Passion love or eros love is when two people who are different see that the other person is different and they say, hey, I want to get to know that person. And they come closer and closer and become more and more like each other. So you notice even spatially, these two loves don't meet if you try to meet one love need with another, right? That's why you need both this way and this way. And when I speak to non-believers about this, to help them understand, I also point out God values this so much that he, in fact, as you know, compares his love to the church with that of a husband who loves his wife and a wife who loves his husband. In fact, gentlemen, if you are a husband, right, you're required to love your wife to the point where you're willing to give up your life for your wife, just like Jesus gave up his life for the church. That's passion love. I really appreciate this example. You might, that's why, do we have this example? No, okay, we got rid of it, okay, because it didn't work. So in terms of the idea of passion love, I think most of us understand with all of this love songs. Have you ever played that game at church where you have to have 2 teams and then you have to sing a song using a word, right? So the color blue, right? You have to come up with a song with the word blue in it, or bird, right? The word that you should never use is the word love, because there's way too many songs about it, right? The problem is most of those songs are about romantic love. You notice that? We don't celebrate all the other loves God has given us. The reason, though, in terms of understanding passion love, is that we recognize something inherent, that we need it, that there's a natural attraction. In fact, biologically, one of the things I teach young people is this term. It's just a biological term called sexual dimorphism. It's the idea that there are organisms that are designed where the males and the females are different, right? So for example, peacocks have tails and peahens don't. In fact, peacocks are from India, and the peacock tail actually makes them more vulnerable to tigers. They get eaten more, because as they're flying, their tail drags on the ground, the tigers can grab it much easier. So why do the guys put up with that? Because those girls can't get attracted unless they have big tails, right? Same thing, say, with lions. Why do lions have manes and lionesses don't? Because male lions have to defend the pride from other male lions. They have to be bigger. They have to look bigger, right? My favorite example is actually that of goats. It's the male goats actually produce hormones through their urine that attracts the females. So they actually pee all over themselves. And that's very attractive to the female goats. And I ask the young people I speak to, which is worse, being the guy who pees on themselves or being the girl who likes it, right? But it's part of biology, right? We attract what's different. My other example that I like actually is you can actually tell the difference between a male and female tortoise. Did you know that? By flipping them over. Because the male tortoise has a concave shell that allows it to mount to the female. The females don't need that. Right here is a perfect example where biology is determined by sexual attraction of the difference. Right? That's sexual dimorphism. So the question then becomes, when we look at sexual attraction being attracting the difference, are we as humans sexually dimorphic? Are we biologically different from each other, males and females? Are our differences there to be used to attract the opposites? Well, I think so. In fact, I would argue there's a natural aversion to being sexually attracted to members of your own sex. Right? There's an you feeling, right, when you think about sexual activity with someone of the same sex, because you see them as the same. And let me be very clear here. I'm not talking about gay people that we have this feeling against. I'm talking about the act itself, right? In fact, here's an example that we do have still, right, Greg? From America's Got Talent, 84-year-old Ray Jessel is invited, and he flubs up all kinds of things when he's introduced, but then he sings a song that he wrote himself that blows the judges away. Listen to his song.
I met this girl, and she's just great. This girl I just adore. The problem is, she has much more than I had bargained for. She's got that style, she's got that smile, she's got the walk, she's got the talk, she's got that zing. There's just one thing, she's got a penis. She's got that flair, knows what to wear. She's got that face, that girlish grace. She's got pizzazz, too bad she has a penis. Now there's always some failure, always some flaw. Ain't that what they call Murphy's Law? But male genitalia, that's where I draw the line. Besides, hers is bigger than mine. My life's a mess, 'cause under that dress, she's got a P-E-N-I-S. Yes.
He moved on to the next round, to say. But isn't that just a natural reaction, though? That's my point. It isn't that we're putting gay people down. That's not my point at all. There just seems to be a healthy aversion to thinking about sexual activity with someone of the same body. And this goes back to my point about sexual dimorphism. It's a biological thing that sexual attraction was meant to attract the difference. Now here's what happens. So why do we have homosexuality? Well, I looked around and watched all these coming out videos, especially from 5 or 10 years ago, because I think things are changing a little more now. And here's a phrase that I often heard, if not always heard, in every coming out video. I never felt like the other boys, or I felt different from the other girls. Right? Listen to Jackson as he shares his coming out story.
This is probably the 50th time I've tried to film this video. By the title of this video, you guys probably know what this is going to be about. 2016 has been a crazy year for me. It's been a year of me getting to know me and me accepting me for myself. And meeting a bunch of you guys, and that means the world to me, and my dreams are coming true. I'm sitting here making this video because I want to tell you guys that I'm gay. And that may be a crazy shock to a lot of you guys, and it might upset you guys and it might confuse you guys. So I want to backtrack. When I was little, I always thought I was special and different from everybody else, and I didn't know what that was. I just had that feeling. I went through high school and middle school. I dated girls, and I never really felt attracted to girls the way I should, the way everybody else told me I should be. I always had the thought in the back of my head, maybe I'm gay. And that was scary. That was not something I knew I didn't know what it was. I never knew a gay person in my life. So thinking that was extremely scary for me. There was nights I would sit up thinking, I would cry myself to sleep. I would pray that I wasn't. I would never say it out loud because that would just make it real. And I didn't want it to be real. I just wanted to fit in and be like everybody else. Deep down, I knew I wasn't like everybody else. I think I knew I was gay by the time I was 12. But from then to 17, I never accepted it. I would just deny it every time it came to my head. I would push it aside and say, no, that can't be me. I'm not that person. And it wasn't until junior year after work, I was sitting in my car and I just said it out loud. I just said, I'm gay. And unless you've been through this and in the same situation as I was, you don't know how hard saying those few words is. Once I said it to myself, it all became real. I finally admitted it. The last year, I've been struggling to fully accept it, and I think I'm at the point where, in order to continue on this journey with you guys, and to be someone you look up to, I have to be myself. I can't keep acting like I'm someone I'm not. I can't do that anymore. This is just one more thing that you guys know about me. I'm still the same kid that you guys fell in love with. I'm the same kid that you've been watching for however long you've been watching, a week, a month, 2 months, 6 months, a year, whatever. I'm still the same person. And now I can be myself. I don't have to pretend to be someone I'm not. If anyone out there is going through the same thing, I just want to let you know that it's okay. You are amazing the way you are. Don't change yourself for anybody else. Be you. Because in the end, that's the only thing that's going to make you happy, is being yourself. If you go through life pretending to be someone you're not, you'll never be happy. I just hope you guys can accept this. I made this video because I wanted to be honest with you guys. I want you guys to know the real me, and I don't want to hide anything from you guys. I want us to be a family. I'm sorry this video is kind of sad, but I'm not sad about it anymore. I've accepted myself, and I am who I am. I'm proud to be that person. I love you guys. Thank you for being here for me. And thank you for making me a stronger person and making me a better person today. I'll see you guys next time. I love you. Bye.
So it's right there, and so many stories are like this, where the person feels like they're not like the other guys or they're not like the other girls. And the assumption is, I'm not like them because I'm gay. But what if the feeling of not being like the other guys or not like the other girls is what contributes to same-sex attraction in the first place? And again, Dr. Van Mol talked about that in all kinds of ways that that's the case. But this is, I think, what we need to be able to understand. When we talk about sexuality, we recognize that men and women are not the same. And we recognize that difference, as C.S. Lewis says, causes the attraction. That's just a biological trait. The reason why sexual reproduction exists is so we can reproduce the next generation. The reason why people want to get together through sexual reproduction is sexual attraction. Right? It's the natural flow of that thinking. But for some reason, when people who are the same sex look at each other. We don't have a sexual attraction, so we can't reproduce. But for people who experience same-sex attraction, for some reason, they don't feel like they're the same. And there could be multiple reasons why that is. I looked up this man from Australia, Alexander Montgomery. He wrote a book called Confessions of a Potato Queen. And if you don't know what a potato queen is someone who is an Asian guy who's only attracted to white guys. The opposite is a rice queen, a white guy who's only attracted to Asian guys. And by the way, the gay community, especially the male gay community, has all kinds of labels like this. One of the biggest debates right now in the gay male community is the racism that they perceive. Because they see this and they think, well, wait a second, why are you only attracted to one race? Well, because in this case, Alexander sees white men as different from him. Take a look what he says in his book. I really feel the white race is the superior one today. I only date white men. To me, white people are the epitome of class and the gold standard of desirability. A lot of Asian guys think like me. And if you go through all kinds of gay relationships, especially the older ones, I think, again, things are changing now with younger people, you begin to realize there's a lot of difference involved in there, isn't there? Race is one of them, but you also have age. You also have situation with lesbian relationships where you notice there's usually one that's more masculine looking, a butch figure, and then a femme figure, a feminine looking one. So even in a same-sex relationship, they're still attracted to what they perceive as different. And when I was seeing my Christian counselor, I realized that was my problem, because I was never attracted to anyone with my skin color or darker. I was only attracted to white guys. And my first thought is, what if I'm a racist, right? Why is this happening? But the more I thought about it, the more I thought, when I was a little kid, I was the chubby little brown kid. I was the only one in my high school. And all that I saw on TV, all the masculine figures were white guys that I could never be. And I dreamed for the opportunity when I thought about those fairy tale stories for the good prince to rescue me. Why couldn't I get someone to rescue me? Because I never identified with the prince, because he never looked like me. And as a child beginning to go through sexually, that need for that affirmation, that attraction, became sexualized, I think. At least this is the self-diagnosis that maybe I shouldn't do, but I think it makes sense. And I see that so often when I talk to people who have same-sex attractions. The Christians I've talked to, when I ask about this, they actually agree. They say what they're attracted to is what they perceive as different. And this has been the problem when we diagnose these issues, at least in the past. When we look at same-sex attraction, we try to fix the attraction. I'm a guy, I want to fix the problem. When in fact, the problem was always self-perception, how we view ourselves. And if our self-perception is flawed, and this is especially true with transgenderism, then no wonder we come up with a conclusion about our identity that's so much more incomplete. And that's why this leads to my last point, which is our understanding to think about and to love people enough to ask those tough questions. Knowing my story and knowing the story of many people who suffer or have same-sex attractions, really, is it loving to encourage that kind of thinking about yourself, about others? Is that really what you want to promote? Because when I see LGBT activists, especially those who claim to be Christian, promoting this, that's what I see now. I see people trying to tell me that my identity has to be based solely on how I feel about myself, and I don't really feel that good about myself growing up. That's not fair. And that is not love. Which leads us to our last point about what love is. It's agape love, unconditional love. And the best part of agape love, this glad love that he has for us, is if you look at all those other three loves, storge, eros, and philia, at their highest form, do you notice? They always go back to God love. They are part of what agape love really is. To understand the depth of God's love for us is to understand that we have a love that meets all those needs and will eventually meet the needs that we may feel incomplete right now. In fact, again, my concern is many of the questions we're getting are from people who have a very different understanding of love. But this, I think Michael Ramsden points out in terms of our understanding of love, is that it's something so much more than just affirming. He says, love does not exist in the absence of judgment. True love exists when someone has passed the correct moral judgment on who you are, is under no illusions as to what you're like, but still loves you. Isn't that what agape is? Right? To love you unconditionally, regardless of what you think you are or how you perceive yourself. That is the reason why I'm here today and not in some LGBT pride parade. That's why I chose as a Christian, regardless of what I struggle with, to be faithful to what God teaches, because I truly understand how much God's love means, and that we will learn so much more about what that love looks like. In fact, we produce this video, we do these talks, our worldview presentations. At the end of the presentation, a woman gave us this poem, and she said, you need to share this poem because you will be able to understand what the Christian understanding of love really looks like. And it was such a good poem, and we actually made it into an animated clip. And this is a little loud, Greg, so feel free to lower the volume here. It's called The Long Silence.
At the end of time,
Maybe put it
billions
up a
of
bit,
people
please.
were scattered on a great plain before God's throne. Most shrank back from the brilliant light before them, but some groups near the front talked heatedly, not with cringing shame, but with belligerence. Can God judge us? How can he know about suffering? Snapped a pert young brunette. She ripped open a sleeve to reveal a tattooed number from a Nazi concentration camp. We endured terror, beatings, torture, death. In another group, a black boy lowered his collar. What about this? He demanded, showing an ugly rope burn, lynched for no crime but being black. In another crowd, a pregnant schoolgirl with sullen eyes. Why should I suffer? She murmured. It wasn't my fault. Far out across the plain, there were hundreds of such groups. Each had a complaint against God for the evil and suffering he permitted in his world. How lucky God was to live in heaven, where all was sweetness and light, where there was no weeping or fear, no hunger or hatred. What did God know of all that human beings had been forced to endure in this world? For God leads a pretty sheltered life, they said. So each of these groups sent forth their leader, chosen because he had suffered the most. A Jew, a black, a person from Hiroshima, a horribly deformed arthritic, a thalidomide child. In the centre of the plain, they consulted with each other. At last, they were ready to present their case. It was rather clever. Before God could be qualified to be their judge, he must endure what they had endured. Their decision was that God should be sentenced to live on earth as a human being. Let him be born a Jew. Let the legitimacy of his birth be doubted. Give him a work so difficult that even his family will think him out of his mind when he tries to do it. Let him be betrayed by his closest friends. Let him face false charges, be tried by a prejudiced jury and convicted by a cowardly judge. Let him be tortured. At last, let him see what it means to be terribly alone. Then let him die. Let him die so that there can be no doubt that he died. Let there be a great host of witnesses to verify it. As each leader announced his portion of the sentence, loud murmurs of approval went up from the throng of people assembled. And when the last had finished pronouncing sentence, there was a long silence. No one uttered another word. No one moved. For suddenly all knew that God had already served his sentence.
To me, to look at me and to rescue me, the Christian story says he already has. That's the point of Christian love, of agape love. And as I conclude, let me encourage you, there's so much more we can talk about, but if this is a topic that you're struggling with and you need help with, let us be a help for you. As a Canadian ministry, we put together a 13-week Bible study course called the Identity Project, where we walk through sexuality and we talk about all aspects of it, not just homosexuality, pornography, singleness. It's a way for you to help your young people navigate through this. And if this is something, especially for those of you who may be entering university or college, like Carleton, where I went, we actually have for the first time Engage Camp, which is a summer camp this week, the second week of August, where we talk about these issues and everything else you may be facing on campus to help you navigate and keep your faith in a hostile environment. And lastly, if you want to know more about my story and know what I've been doing as part of an apologetics ministry, because this is not an easy thing. I'm defending the very faith that keeps me chaste, that says I can't act the way I want to act. And part of the reason why that is because we recognize not only do we have good news to share, we have an opportunity to do it while we're still here. So we're having our Be Ready conference. Look at faithbeyondbelief.ca. We have some information on the back. And my talk at that conference is this: can we still share Jesus to the LGBT community in Canada? And I want to tell you the answer is yes. Right. So thank you so much.